Okay, so welcome everybody. I am Jennifer Slafer and I am one of the co-vice presidents of the Connecticut Reading Association. And I am very excited this evening to be presenting along with the Connecticut Science of Reading folks. So the Connecticut Reading Association and the Connecticut Science of Reading have teamed up for this event, exploring the science of reading. Because we think that it's a really important topic. It's something that has been getting a lot of press. And I think that being able to get a local eye on it is a really important piece of the puzzle. So I'm going to have Lisa talk a little bit about the Connecticut Science of Reading group, and then I will talk a little bit about the Connecticut Reading Association.
Sure. Thank you.
If I can get this to move, that'd be even better. There we go.
Thanks, Jen. Welcome everybody. And yeah, I'm going to tell you a little commercial for the Connecticut Science of Reading group, who is co-collaborating on tonight's event. So Jen, you're going to take over admitting, or do you want me to?
I got it. I think.
Perfect. So we are newly formed and started in January. We're an offshoot of the main Science of Reading, What I Should Have Learned in College group. And our mission is to help engage educators in collaborative discussion in learning about the body of work called the Science of Reading, and connecting scientific reading research to practice, to our instructional practice on how we learn to read and write and spell, and how we teach reading and writing and spelling. And our membership spans lots of professionals and includes educators in various forms who both live and or work in Connecticut. We have pre-K to 12 teachers, administrators, specialists, private practitioners, advocates, higher education professionals, and private consultants like Literacy How and Hill for Literacy people are also in our group. A researcher, one of the researchers, Phonemic Heft from UConn's Brain Lens Lab, also contributes to our learning and discussion. And we're just very fortunate to have so many resources in the state of Connecticut to pull from. So we hope you come join us. If you decide to come join our group, in addition to learning and networking with other educators in a friendly environment, we offer free webinars like this one. We do book studies together. We have meet and greets and other kinds of events to get to know other teachers in the state of Connecticut. And you'll find all of our webinars posted to our YouTube channel, which is called the Connecticut Science of Reading. Some of our recent topics included morphological awareness and structured word inquiry, integrating technology into structured literacy, making the shift to structured literacy. And then Devin Kearns presented on a new phonics curriculum that he co-authored with a literacy specialist from West Hartford. And Phonemic Heft presented on the neuroscience of dyslexia. And then Kate presented on sound walls for our group, which was a very well loved presentation.
Thank you.
And you can find us on Facebook at the Connecticut Science of Reading, and on YouTube also at CT Science of Reading. And that's it for us.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'm representing the Connecticut Reading Association Incorporated tonight. And our mission is to empower educators, inspire students, and encourage our community to embrace literacy as an essential tool for lifelong success. Like the Connecticut Science of Reading group, we have membership that spans professionals working in preschool to postgrads. We're teachers, we're reading specialists. We're anybody who does anything with literacy, with children from preschool up through postgraduate. We also offer workshops on topics related to literacy. We're really, throughout the year, we try to reach all of our membership. So what we're working on for the future this year is morphology, a workshop on dyslexia, workshop on independent readers, teaching writing, small group instruction, executive functioning skills, because they all play somehow into the reading or the literacy equation. Please consider becoming a member for $25 per year. The one perk is that you do get first access to our events, and some of our events do close out with just our membership. So that is who we are. And where you can find us is we have a website, ctreading.org. We're on Twitter at CT Reading Inc. We're on Instagram, CT Reading Inc. And you can also see that we are listed. We have a Facebook page also. So whichever social media you prefer, we're there. And I hope that you will look us up and follow us and join us possibly too. So like I said before, oh, I'm sorry. Huge thing I need to talk about. Totally forgot about this. Every year we sponsor annual awards, and the Connecticut Reading Association has these awards for people in the state of Connecticut who are literacy leaders among us, an outstanding administrator among us for literacy, celebrating literacy, award of excellence, and CRA exceptional author award. The reason why I'm not giving descriptions right now is because I really want you to go and check out the details and see the nomination links at ctreading.org, because there's some really exciting people that we work with, and it would really be great if they could be honored through the Connecticut Reading Association Awards. It's in the spring. The deadline is November 30th, so I hope that you will go to our website and get that information. The other thing I'd like to share that's very exciting is that every year the Connecticut Reading Association sponsors teacher grants. We give up to 10 grants per year at $750 per grant for your literacy project. So that's to order books, that's to do something innovative with literacy in your classroom or in your school, or to host some sort of an event. Again, you can check out all the details at connecticutreading.org. The deadline for those applications is January 1st. And for the teacher grants specifically, you do need to be a CRA member to apply. And if you go to our website, you can see some of our projects from the past. Really exciting opportunity for classroom teachers, because I do think that one of the main complaints is, where do I get money for books? How do I get more books into the hands of kids? And this is a great way to make that happen. So I hope you check that out on our website also.
Thanks.
So we're here at our main event. We're very excited, as I said before, to explore the science of reading. And we have two experts with us tonight. Lisa Gianni is a literacy and reading specialist with 20 years of teaching, remedial reading, and instructional coaching experience. She holds a master's degree in elementary education with specialties in reading and language, as well as certification as a K-12 remedial reading and language arts specialist. She has completed Orton Gillingham associate level training. She's the creator and administrator of the Connecticut Science of Reading group on Facebook. And if you haven't joined that yet, you really should. Great information comes through there. And that's a professional and social learning community and a branch of the main Science of Reading Facebook group. Lisa has spent over 6 years learning about the science of reading. And more recently, she teaches as an adjunct professor at Albertus Magnus College in the Remedial Reading and Language Arts Certification Program. Lisa is interested in helping bridge scientific research to instructional practice and translate that information in a way that is easy to understand for teachers and educators. She believes that the right to read is a basic human right for all students, and that with informed educators, all children can become skillful and proficient readers. And she's tag teaming it tonight with Kate Pearce, another expert in the science of reading. Kate is the owner of Kate Pearce Educational Services, where she has spent over a decade learning about the science of reading. So Kate was learning about the science of reading before it was even the big buzz that it is now. So she really comes to us with a rich history. Kate and her team are made up of teachers, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, and psychologists, and are trained in Orton Gillingham, Writing Revolution, visualizing and verbalizing, as well as a host of other evidence-based methods. They all work together to remediate, educate, advocate, and differentiate for children with language learning differences, as well as help educators learn how to incorporate best practices into their teaching. We are in good hands tonight, folks, and I am going to stop sharing my screen so that Lisa and Kate can get going. And again, thank you all for being here.
Yes, absolutely. That was great. Thank you so much, Jen. And yeah, I'm going to share my screen and we will get started, and I'll put it in present mode. And one other little kind of logistical thing, if you go up to view and you change to speaker view, you'll see our screen a little bit easier and you won't have to juggle between everybody. So welcome everybody tonight, and a little bit of an agenda kind of to lay out the structure of tonight's workshop or webinar. We're going to give a brief introduction of the major understandings of the science of reading and the science of teaching reading. We're going to define dyslexia and understanding that structured literacy works for all students. And towards the end of our presentation, we'll touch briefly on the Connecticut dyslexia and right to read laws that are have currently just passed. Oops, I don't think, there we go. Before I play this, I just wanted to talk about knowing your why, because I think that's really an important question as educators that always kind of sits within us as educators. And I want you to think about, why should we base instruction on reading science? We're going to watch this little video. It's 3 minutes, and we'll get your reaction afterwards.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's, you know, it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, you know, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director? Cool. Yes, sir. All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Wow. That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying? Now, once you give me the version, is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick. If you know which version I'm talking about, just see if that exists. Let me see what you got. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Okay. Here's what I want you to catch. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
Oops. Oop. So what did you think about that? I'm going through my slideshow too quickly. What did you think about that? If you want to put in the chat, when you know your why, it feels like you become more attached to what you're doing in the classroom, right? You become more purposeful about what you're choosing for instruction. So we're going to look at a little kind of some data that is a little sobering. Big picture of reading in the United States currently. The National Association of Educational Progress talks about where our 4th graders and 8th graders are in achievement. And in the United States, our why is to be a society in which everyone can read and understand text at an entry-level college level. After high school, kids could be or should be college and career ready. So they should have that choice. And we also believe that literacy is an essential skill needed to participate in the world fully and function in society. But unfortunately, there's an enormous percentage of people, both young and old and in between, who cannot read well enough or adequately enough to function or expand their own knowledge of the world around them. And it's especially distressing because we now know through the science of reading that the majority of students, 95% of them, can learn to read regardless of their background, including learning deficits and disabilities. So the latest NAEP scores indicate that 4th and 8th grade scores, students are achieving in the 60% range. 63% of our 4th graders are reading at a basic and below basic level, and 64% of 8th graders also are reading at a below or basic level of proficiency. So where does Connecticut stand in all of this? Oh, I don't know why this does this. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get out of present mode. Kate, I might have you actually present for me and go through the slides. But we want all of our kids to be this little boy sitting in this hammock enjoying a book, because we want kids to get lost in a book. And that's the best thing they could experience, is being in a hammock under the tree, getting lost in a book. And here's where we are in Connecticut. Grade 4, this was the nation's report card back in 2019 pre-pandemic. So you can see 60% of our 4th graders in Connecticut are reading at a basic or below basic level. 8th grade, not much better, similar story. 58% of our 8th graders are entering high school reading at a basic or below basic level. So what are we going to do about it? What can we do differently? Because when you know better, you do better, as Maya Angelou says. So let's talk about the science of reading and how that can help us shift our practice or learn more about what we can do to help change the outcomes of these students. Research suggests that using ineffective teaching methods along with instructional strategies that are without enough research evidence limits student mastery of essential skills and new concepts. For example, even though extensive research clearly shows that students, regardless of their learning difficulties, reach higher and faster achievement with systematic and explicit instruction, this type of instruction isn't always used in our classrooms. The phrase, the science of reading, refers to a vast interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to reading and writing. This research has been conducted over the last 5 decades across the world from thousands of studies in multiple languages. The science of reading has culminated in a preponderance of evidence to inform how proficient reading and writing develop, why some people have difficulty, and how we can most effectively assess and teach and therefore improve student outcomes through prevention of and intervention for reading difficulties. Reading research is derived from a variety of multiple fields: education research, psychology, linguistics, and neuroscience. And within these larger fields, other fields also have contributed to the science of reading and evidence-based practice. Within psychology, cognitive and developmental psychology make contributions, and within linguistics, communication sciences also make contributions. We're going to touch on a little bit of what each of these fields brings to the science of reading and to our overall understanding of reading. So let's look at linguistics. And this comes from Dr. Holly Lane from the University of Florida Literacy Institute. So linguistics is the study of language structure, and that includes things like semantics, things like syntax, which is the order of words, morphology, the smallest unit of meaning, phonology, and phonetics, all of which are important in learning to read and having an understanding of this research, and the findings from the research in linguistics will help us understand what to teach and how we need to sequence that instruction. It helps us know what skills kids need to know before learning a new skill, so those prerequisite skills. The findings can also tell us things like how articulatory gestures can help develop phonemic awareness, how instruction in syntax can help improve reading comprehension, and how oral language and morphology and decoding instruction contribute to the development of skilled reading. Psychology. The discipline of psychology refers to the study of thinking and learning. It refers to the study of the mental processes like memory and attention and perception and problem solving. This research from psychology tells us about things like knowledge networks and things like how objects and things are stored in our memory, the kinds of practice in our classrooms that promote learning, like blocked practice, where a student repeats the same skill over and over before moving to a new skill, or distributed practice, where there's practice periods are separated by lengthy time before repeating the new skill, that's the skill again, as well as how we organize and retrieve information. All of this helps us understand how people learn, and understanding how people learn helps us understand more about how we should teach. Neuroscience. This is my favorite science because I love the brain. So neuroscience is the study of the structure and function of the human brain. And it's really become a huge part of the science of reading research in recent years, with the work and learning around dyslexia and the impact of early intervention and explicit and systematic instruction on students with dyslexia and other struggling readers. This field, neuroscience, helps us understand what parts of the brain are involved in different reading activities, how the brains of typical readers look different from the brains of struggling readers or students with dyslexia, and how things change when students get proper intervention. We know from MRI scans, functional MRI scans, that we can physically see brains change when students with dyslexia have gotten correct improper intervention. The research and findings from neuroscience contributes to our understanding of what's going on in the brain and why we are using the practices we're using. But the science of reading is not, there's some things that people think the science of reading is that isn't. It is not an ideology or philosophy. It's not a fad, a trend, a new idea, or a pendulum swing. It's not a political agenda. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach to instruction. Or is it a program? It's not one specific curriculum, one specific program. And it's not a single specific component of instruction, such as phonics. So that leads us to two main theoretical frameworks that underpin the science of reading. We're going to talk about two of them. The first one is the simple view of reading. These two frameworks that you're going to see in a little bit should be used to inform both reading assessment and reading instruction. They really ground our work and what we're doing in instruction and choosing how we're going to teach and what we're going to teach. So the simple view of reading is was written by Philip Goff and Bill Tunmer, and it was first proposed in 1986. And it's been validated in over 150 studies and been endorsed by many, many reading experts. It's an easy way to understand a very complex process. Just because it's called the simple view of reading doesn't mean that it assumes the reading is a simple process. Reading is a very complex combination of skills that have to work together. And it answers this question. When you're presented with a passage of text, how do you get meaning from it? The simple view of reading says you need to do two things. You need to convert written words into speech, and then you need to understand that speech. So let's take a look at what it's showing us here. On the left in the blue box, you'll see decoding and word recognition, which is the ability to read individual words. And in the green box, you'll see oral language comprehension, which is our ability to understand spoken language. Reading comprehension on the other side of the equation is the product of both decoding and language comprehension. Reading comprehension is the ability to understand printed text. So if in a typical multiplication problem, if you're multiplying by 0 at any point, your outcome is also 0. So if you have good decoding, but poor language comprehension, reading comprehension will not be successful. If you have poor decoding, but strong language comprehension, reading comprehension will not be successful. However, if you have both good decoding, good language comprehension, you are going to be a successful and skilled reader. And that kind of leads us into the second framework, which is called Scarborough's reading rope. This was created by Hollis Scarborough 20 years ago. Hollis was a researcher at Haskins Lab here in Connecticut at Yale. She has since retired, but this has traveled many reading specialist programs. Many of you have probably seen it. And it's a visual metaphor of the simple view of reading. And it talks about how these individual strands and skills develop over time. You can see the word recognition portion of the strand that matches the decoding section of the simple view of reading, and the language comprehension piece working together to create a skilled reader. Each of these strands starts out individually when children are first exposed to language. And then as the students become increasingly automatic and increasingly strategic in their skill, you can see how the strands become more tightly woven over time. Eventually, they become skilled readers who exhibit fluent execution and coordination of both language comprehension and word recognition. The word recognition section of the rope includes things like phonological awareness, both at the larger unit of sound like syllables and down to the phoneme level. Includes things like decoding, which encompasses the alphabet principle, and spelling sound correspondences. And includes things, this term, sight recognition, which Kate will talk about later a little bit, really refers to not sight word reading, but reading as if by sight. Language comprehension includes, you can see there's many more pieces of the rope at the top part of the rope. And this is very important to always be focused on, not just word recognition. You need both. Includes things like background knowledge, vocabulary instruction, not only intentional, but incidental. Kids need wide reading, lots of vocabulary that they hear to build that mental lexicon of words. Language structures like syntax and semantics, verbal reasoning, including inference and metaphor, and then just general understanding of literacy knowledge of genres, types of book, types of text structure, and print concepts. Kate, did you want to talk about this one?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I just love this. Sorry, I just have to get it on my thing. This is really the part of the rope with like the decoding and the phonological awareness, but I just saw this passage and I saw this quote, and I always tell people I want it on my tombstone because it's so important. And the main thing is that if you think about, we give like kindergartners 30 sight words to memorize, but we're not teaching them all the little components of reading. So I always say, when I saw this, if like a child can memorize 10 words, the child could only read 10 words. But if the child learns the sounds of 10 letters, the child will be able to read 353 sound words, 4,324 sound words, and 21,655. 650 sound words. I just had to throw this in here somewhere because our presentation was getting so long, but it had to go somewhere. So I wanted to just put it here just so everyone could just take a mental note of that, how much we have kids memorize, but we don't have them memorize all these sounds. But we are going to go into that, but I just needed to put it in there and I made that. So Lisa,
yeah.
Next.
Thank you. Yep. Yes, we don't want kids to be memorizing you can't. You just can't. You don't have the mental capacity to memorize all the words in the English language. So we need to teach them how to break the code. And you can see there's 44 different speech sounds in our language, but they're represented by about 250 graphemes. We spell words so different. So it's not a one-to-one match like other languages are.
So it's giving children options of different rules and patterns that they can use.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, like 90% of the English language is rule-based. And we always say it's so tricky, it's so hard, but if us as educators learned all of it, and you're not going to learn it overnight, it takes years and years to learn. But if we start somewhere, hopefully all of our reading scores would go up.
Yep. So let's think about which leads us into this next part, right? So how does reading develop in our brains? We have different parts of our brain that are used in different ways, and we're actually repurposing the speaking portion of our brain and using it for reading, okay? Our brains were wired for speech, not for reading, and reading is really very new. Our alphabet is only a few thousand years old, and we've been speaking since humans have been around. So recent research using brain scans has been able to capture what happens in our brains when we read. Before children come to school, they have naturally learned how to talk and have learned a lot about the meanings of the words that they hear and the words that they speak. Speaking is hardwired, but the circuits for reading have to be built. So if you think about pre-K and K students, we can teach them to tune into the sounds of spoken language and to break spoken words apart. Around the same time as that's happening, children can also learn to recognize a few letters. And then in K and 1, we get students to start to learn to connect sounds to in the spoken language that they're speaking to the print that they've just learned. They start to form representations of sequences of letter sounds, and they store them as words, which are also connected to their understanding of what the words mean. So this kind of gives you a picture of how all these parts of our brain and all these pathways are being created to work together. This reading circuit looks the same in the brain of all students, but people who struggle with reading are missing these strong connections. So what we teach and how we teach can either create and reinforce those brain connections, or it can leave students without the connections to read for meaning. And as educators, we have to understand that our job is to help that interface become created between our vision system, down here, the visual word form area and visual input area. It all happens in the back of the brain, to the language system, which happens towards the front of the brain and the temporal area. At the foundation of this, all this brain activity and neural activity and circuitry is the ability to process spoken language. And we can do it at the individual phoneme level, which is why phonemic awareness is so important even in pre-K. So for example, we want students to be able to say the sounds in the word cat as k, at. And then we want them to eventually map those phonemes, those individual sounds, to the letters that we use to represent or spell those sounds. So remember, letters don't make sounds, they spell sounds. And that whole process is called orthographic mapping. And that's a mental process that happens as we teach kids phonemic awareness and matching what they hear and what they're saying to how we spell it with our alphabetic writing system. This visual word form area has to be built one connection at a time. You have to learn, I had it written down here, I have little cards. You have to learn that this stands for P most of the time, as in like pen. And then you also have to learn that OUGH stands for the sound at the end of though, but sometimes it can stand for the sound in through. So you have to be able to expose kids to enough language that they begin to make those connections on their own. On average, it takes kids 2 to 3 years to learn to decode English. English is the toughest alphabetic writing system in the world because it's morphophonemic and it's an extremely deep orthography, meaning that the words are spelled not only for the way they sound, but also for their meaning. And on top of that, our language has its roots in many, many other languages, mostly German and Old English, as well as Romance languages like French and Italian. So what do we teach? What are the essential components of reading instruction that we should teach? I liked this graphic because it lists more than just the 5 pillars of literacy that most of us are familiar with. It also includes language development and social emotional learning, which are the whole child. We want to educate the whole child. So I'll briefly kind of go through most of these pillars. So phonemic awareness is the ability to consciously recognize and manipulate the smallest unit of sound in our language. So for example, if I said, say cat, now say cat without k, you would say at. We want kids to be able to do that and do that with automaticity. Word recognition and alphabetic coding, those kind of go together in that phonics category. And that's the ability to recognize printed words both accurately and quickly and efficiently so that they can gain access to the meaning that's stored in their mental dictionary. Alphabetic coding includes things like mapping letters and letter patterns onto the phonological forms at the level of the phoneme. When we think about vocabulary instruction, we're thinking about building that mental dictionary or mental lexicon of knowledge of words and creating stored meanings of those, so that when kids encounter those words in print, they have something to attach it and anchor it to in their long-term memory. When we think about comprehension, we're thinking about not only, we're thinking about language comprehension and reading comprehension. And then knowledge, we want to build knowledge and build background knowledge, exposing kids to not only to the world, but to relevant content and things that will help them access what they're reading in the classroom. And writing is always really important. If you can get kids to write about what they're reading, you know that they understand it in a fluent way. Okay. And that leads us to what science can tell us about patterns of reading skills in kids. So the simple view of reading helps us recognize there's 4 quadrants that we can break kids into. The horizontal axis is decoding and word recognition. And then we have the vertical axis as language comprehension. If we look in quadrant 1, here's our kids who with good language comprehension, but weak decoding or word recognition. These are also, these are beginning readers, right? So they understand, but they're not yet capable of doing the breaking the code yet because we haven't given them instruction. But it's also people with reading difficulties like dyslexia.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Oops, sorry. And then if you look in quadrant 2, these are your readers who are both weak in language comprehension and weak in decoding. These could also be, so kids in this quadrant would be kids who might be learning English as a second language. And also generally just readers who have a mixed reading disability. They have reading deficits in both areas. And then if you look at quadrant 3, those are our kids with weak language comprehension, but great decoding. These are kids who could have a developmental language disorder. And those were, those we have specific strategies for. And then quadrant 4 is good language comprehension and good decoding. And those are your kids with no reading difficulties. So we want everybody to be in quadrant 4. And I'm going to let Kate take over.
All right, thanks. All right, so I want everyone to take a minute to read this passage silently to yourself. Okay, can we go to the next?
Want to go to the next one? Okay.
Yep. So what that passage actually just said is the bottom, at least, oh, sorry. I have to get there. The bottom line is that it does exist no matter what name people give it, i.e. specific learning disability. In fact, according to Sally Shaywitz, it's prevalent in actually 1 in 5 children, which is 20%. Dyslexia, in the simplest terms, is a difficulty with phonological processing that makes it challenging to decode words, spell, and comprehend what has been read. For those with double deficit dyslexia, they also have difficulty with rapid naming, which makes it difficulty for them to name things, letters, etc., which impedes fluency. Some students have both and some just one. Go to the next one.
Go to the next one.
Yeah, because I'm gonna. So if you think back about that first one, you might have been reading it and thinking, okay, I can do this. What's, not a big deal. And all of a sudden you realize that it doesn't make sense. And you start to get anxious and nervous, and you feel like, well, why isn't it making sense? And usually when I do a simulation, a full simulation, I would have you read the whole entire thing, and then I'd ask you questions and I'd be timing you, and you most likely would start to feel anxious because you don't understand, like, why doesn't it make sense? Well, that is how 1 in 5 children with dyslexia read, because they have a disability. But we're teaching many more students how to read like this by using methods that aren't backed by using all the components of the science of reading. And I'm going to go a little bit more into that.
Can we go?
Yep. Okay. So why it was so hard to read that first passage is because our brains were never designed. We're designed to recognize objects and not to read. The part of the brain that our ancient ancestors relied to see, like a bush or a dinosaur coming at them, is the same part of the brain we now use to understand letters and words on a page. And I know Lisa talked about it quickly before, but really reading is a fairly new skill for us and our brains, and that we have to rewire them. Can you go to the next slide?
Yep.
So over time, neuroscientists have studied and how our brains learn to read more than anything else. And their findings are really fascinating. And like I said, we've learned that reading is not a natural skill. We use brain areas that have properties that make them suitable to be involved in reading, but they were not actually designed to read. And I want you to think about it this way. If you see a phone, and it doesn't matter which way I put the phone, it's still a phone. If I see a tree falling over and you see it in the distance, you know it's a tree. Doesn't matter which way you see it, you know that object of what it is. Upside down, sideways, you know the object. Our brains are suitable for 3-dimensional shapes. That's how they're meant. That's how they come to us. However, when children go to school, we say, this is a B. You can hit it again, Lise. This is a D. It only goes, it says B and D, and it only goes this way. And our visual systems have to be flexible. Otherwise, we're going to have an infinite number of objects to recognize and hold on to. And this is only work for so long if we don't teach children all the components of the science of reading. And yes, some brains can hold on to more information, but many more cannot. I don't know if I want to. Next slide.
Oops. Oh, there's a little quote at the top.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't remember all these words. Okay, so not all students need to be reprogrammed to the same extent. Some computer brains, visual systems, pick up the code a lot faster. Those are the kids without, a lot of learning, don't have any learning disabilities. And it's not that they are able to really good memorize words. We just know that they crack the code. The first time a skilled reader sees a word, they go through them very carefully and they try to match the sound to the letter. And they have good phonemic awareness. It's not that they have a good visual memory, that they have good phonemic awareness. They can crack that code. And once they've done that a few times, the word moves to that visual portion of their brain and it's treated more like an object, and they're able to pick it up quickly. You don't have to sound out every word unless you come across a word you've never seen before. However, the dyslexic brain or the non-skilled reader are still working on dial-up. And our job as educators is to rewire that portion of their brain. And usually they have poor phonemic awareness, and they have a hard time understanding how the sounds are made up into the words. And the process of decoding is super hard for them. And that largely stems from how words are broken up. And these two areas of the brain where it's like word analysis and word form, I'm doing it on my screen and you guys can't see it, but are not working together. There's a complete disconnect. So our job is to make sure those two areas, we take those wires and plug them together by using all these components. Hold on. Okay. So why, next slide, please.
Yep, why is early? Is that the one you're on?
Yep.
Okay, click it again.
Yep. So
And
why, yeah, you could click it now. So why is early identification, and again, early identification key? Because there comes a day that the child who we think is a reader starts to struggle and their brains are exploding because they can't hold on to any more words or objects and they have no tools in their toolbox to figure it out. I can't tell you how many kids come through my practice in around 4th, 5th, even 6th or 7th grade that their parents are convinced that they're dyslexic or convinced there's a reading disability. And in reality, they don't have a learning disability, or they just were never taught all these components. So there's gaps in their reading and they don't have any real strategies to figure out words. They don't know the morphology of words. They don't know the meanings or the vocabulary, or they've been left to read on their own for so long without having those big meaningful conversations that they aren't putting it into practice. And I see it every day. We go off and we say to 3rd graders, 4th graders, go off and do independent reading for 45 minutes. And they're like, yeah, and they say they're reading, but then we're not asking them to follow up in other areas of like having them write about what they wrote, or the teacher knowing every book, because that's impossible for every teacher to know what every child's reading, or if they're even struggling to read. So we have to, when we create our lesson plans and we figure out all of this, we have to make sure we are hitting all these components because it's important. Next one.
Yep.
Okay, so what the science of reading has taught us is that all brains benefit from the reprogram and overriding using systematic phonics and the components of science and reading. However, our schools are still using strategies that are not beneficial to readers. And if only 1% of the population, okay, so 1 in 5 students are dyslexic. Out of that 1 in 5, less than 1% are actually identified as being dyslexic or even having a reading disability. They slip through the cracks all of the time. And why are they slipping through the cracks? It's because of strategies like this. They're, looking at a picture to figure out a word, or they're, I had a student actually recently came to me and, she saw the word monkey and she kept saying on. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she was pulling that one word out. And I'm like, uh-oh. She had no idea anything about syllables or breaking up words. So I see how I get to see the long haul, when some teachers only get to see the present. I kind of see the long haul of what is happening. And what we do know is that some computer brains don't need all of this, but we don't know it until it's too late. So if we teach it all now, then we don't have to worry. Our cleanup process at the end for those kids that really are struggling will be so much less. I have 2 dyslexic boys that I taught from the beginning how to read. I taught, they weren't allowed to use strategies like looking at the pictures. I only would use evidence, I learned really early on in parenting with my younger kids that they were, they looked like readers on paper, but I knew they weren't reading. So I made sure assessments were assessments that were backed by science, were not, looking at pictures or, things that could lead the teacher down the wrong path, not because they didn't love my children and not because they didn't want the best, only because they really did believe that my kids were readers. And I see it all the time. So we have to get better at assessments to be able to understand where those holes are. So, and my heart breaks as I am a former special education teacher. And I remember having 12 kids on my caseload thinking that was a lot, but now poor teachers have like 24 on their caseload, even more than that, some of them. I actually met a teacher that has 30 children on her caseload. There is, to me, that is like ridiculous. That is impossible. But we would have so many kids in special education if we taught them properly from the beginning. And that is our goal, is to help you understand how we can get less kids, you know, identified because they are getting all the structures and they're not so far behind. Like I said, I have 2 dyslexic boys that would never be classified today, but they're always dyslexic. They'll never read as fast as their non-dyslexic peers, but they are able to get by with extra time and some accommodations. They don't really need remediation because they've gotten it all along. Okay, so next.
There we go.
You want to go, so this is Connecticut's working definition of dyslexia. It's specific learning dyslexia. It impacts reading, specifically decoding and accurate and or fluent word recognition and spelling. Dyslexia is a neurobiological in origins and is unexpected and or inconsistent with a student's other disabilities. I think dyslexia is not a IQ difference. It's a neurological difference in how the brain processes sounds and is overriding that system. So I just think as educators, it's very important to explain to parents that this is just a different way, a different map that we're going to have to rewire and do it a little bit more intense. Then, you know, parents panic when they hear disability, dyslexia. They automatically think everyone's reading backwards, which nobody is. It's that phonological awareness component. Usually that's weak.
Yep. Moving on.
Yep. Liz, you want to do the next one, Liz?
Sure. I don't have the thing printed out.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. No. Okay. So what is structured literacy?
Yeah.
Sorry. So structured literacy is an umbrella term.
Mm-hmm.
And it's used by the International Dyslexia Association and it encompasses every evidence. It encompasses evidence-based programs and approaches that align to the knowledges and practices standards. Yep. The knowledge and skills that all teachers of reading should sorry, did I just change that?
Nope.
Okay, sorry. Should possess to teach. Sorry. Let me go. I'm going to do this. Let's make the structured literacy is explicit.
Mm-hmm.
It is diagnostic and it's systematic. And then if you go to the next part, it incorporates more. Here's the phonology part of it. Here are the different elements in it. Phonology is not just sound symbols to knowledge. It could be also the phonological, the syllables, mm-hmm. adding syllables, deleting syllables, hearing it without letters attached. Yeah. I think you have to remember kids' visual systems are also screwed up. So we have to reprogram all of those components, and not just younger kids. If we did it in the younger grades, the time they got to the older grades, that would be very beneficial to those teachers as well as there, because they would already hear those components. But then there's the syntax part of it, and the semantics. Now, effective reading instruction for most children incorporate all of these. It's cumulative, it's explicit, it goes and we keep doing it. We go from simplistic to harder to harder. It builds on each other. We're not going to teach a kindergartner what we would teach a 4th grader. We're not going to teach a 4th grader what we teach a 7th or 8th grader. We're not going to 8th grader to a 12th grader. It builds on each other, but we have to start somewhere.
And I would just add that when you think about the principles of structured literacy, and we're going to, in the next slides, we're going to look at structured literacy compared to typical literacy practices in our classrooms for some of us. And that explicit piece is really, really important. And not every student in your classroom needs explicit instruction. You don't have to do it for everybody. Some kids might be more beneficial from doing inquiry-based or discovery-based, but you have to at least give everyone the same explicit whole class, and then you pull in your differentiation from there.
Wait, and I just want to add to that, because I know when I was in college and grad school, that we were all about making it individualized.
Mhm.
But what is happening is we're dumbing it down for kids who don't have an IQ issue. And so then they're not experiencing that higher level vocabulary or instruction. We're saying, no, you're only here, you're down here because you can't read, or so we're going to give you these books. And so we're not building them up either. So we have to, Lisa's 100% right, where we have to give access to everybody
Mhm.
the same.
The same. Mhm.
And it makes our lives as educators so much easier.
So let's take a look at how structured literacy is different from typical literacy that we might see in our classrooms. And I'm not going to like read this whole thing to you. And we will share this. I guess we could probably share the slideshow. I'll talk to Jen about it. But if you look at different skill areas, if we take a look at, for example, phonics and spelling. In structured literacy, it's intentional. The instruction is letter sound combinations. It's sequence, like Kate was talking about, from easier to more complex for reading and both spelling. And there's application of word reading in print. Versus in a typical literacy practice that we already have, that most classrooms are doing, is it's taught more analytically. It's from whole to part, or it's incidentally kind of as it comes up. And there's no systematic rhyme or reason to it, and it's not sequence. And as students make mistakes in text, we're taught to talk about word families and onset rhyme, and those kinds of feedback are given. You might be doing mini lessons where students are responding to students' errors around a mini lesson. If you take a look at vocabulary and oral reading, in a structured literacy classroom, oral language is the reference point for print. We're looking at speech to print instead of print to speech. Books are used for reading aloud, are at a higher level of listening, and they're more challenging than those students can read independently. And the dialogue that teachers are using for those books is scripted. The teacher knows specifically what she's going to cover and why she's choosing that book as a read aloud. Most of the time in a typical classroom, the read aloud is modeled from a leveled book that the students will read in a small group, or it's non-directive questioning and discussion. If you look at text reading fluency, younger students, early readers, are reading text that's controlled to only include those phonics patterns that have been explicitly taught. Fluency is built only after accuracy is achieved. There's a high degree of student-teacher back and forth and immediate corrective feedback. And the feedback is focused solely on print. Eyes are always on the text because that's where the answer lies. The answer is not at the teacher. It's not up in the sky. It's not around the room, and it's certainly not in the picture. So pictures are great. I have nothing against illustrations. I think they're wonderful, but pictures are not used for decoding. Pictures are used to support comprehension and for pulling meaning that's not written in the text. So illustrations are fabulous. They're just not meant for decoding words. So in a typical literacy practice, we're using leveled text or predictable text that are not really controlled for decoding. They're meant for meaning. They're meant for use meaning and context to figure out unfamiliar words, guess, predict, use picture cues, or figure out the meaning from context. There's a lot of independent silent reading, and then teachers are often doing a miscue analysis or running record looking for how often children are using meaning, syntax, or visual when they make an error. So those are some of the differences.
And I also want to add that what a elementary school teacher isn't doing is not going to be the same as a middle or high school teacher, but it's important for middle school and high school teachers to understand the progression of language and how knowing all these components. Our goal is to hope that all the elementary school kids get all of these components and have a good foundation. So when they get into the middle and high school, the teachers could build even more on that. But a teacher in the middle school needs to understand when they're reading with a child or looking at their writing when they're analyzing their writing about their reading, they'll be able to pick up what the child is missing and be like, oh, this child, they can't spell. Why can't they spell? Okay, what components are they missing? And be able to help and troubleshoot. So it's important for all of us to know that. It's finding the time to teach everybody all of this. And that's where Lisa and I come in, is trying to help you guys understand how we could help take what you have and make it shiny again, and help you plan lessons and take out all the guesswork, because who has all of that time as educators? I know I didn't, and I still struggle with time, but to me, this is so second nature. But to someone starting out, you need to be able to ask questions and guidance, and there's no stupid question. And it's okay to make mistakes. We really are stronger together.
Absolutely. So that kind of leads us into structures, kind of bigger structures around whole school implementation. So MTSS is multi-tiered systems of support, and it's a lot of people think it's related to RTI and SRBI. SRBI is really focused on the academic piece, where MTSS includes both behavior and academics. It's a tiered model of prevention and intervention. And everyone's most people have seen this triangle kind of graphic. We're looking for 80% kids at core. Some kids, 15%, would require your tier 2 targeted small group short-term intervention. 5% or few of your kids would require more intensive data-based intervention. That's a little bit longer term. But again, this is a model that's flexible. Kids are not meant to stay in a tiered model for a very long time. Combined with STSS, MTSS is assessment. So if you think about assessment in kind of 4 quadrants, we're looking at screening, diagnostic, progress monitoring, and outcome. So we want to get all students reading at grade level, and that requires we collect data in a coordinated way. So universal screening helps tell us which students and which systems need our support. And then diagnostic data helps tell us exactly what to teach each student. And then progress monitoring helps us tell us in real time if our instruction is actually working to help that child reach goal. And then our outcome evaluation at the end of each grade tells us if our students met our objectives. And all of this is kind of couched or contained in a collaborative problem-solving model. And that's used within a specific database decision model, and it's called collaborative problem solving. So as you apply this process to the systems level and your student level concerns, you're going to learn how to solve any issue that might confront your school, asking what the problem is, why it's happening, what should we do about it, and did it work? And again, you repeat the process. So I want to just kind of briefly talk about where we are in Connecticut and how the landscape is shifting. If we look to recently, 2 laws were passed in Connecticut. One of them has to do with dyslexia and reading disabilities. The other is called the Right to Read Act, and has to do with core instruction. So I can't speak too much about what's going on. I can only share what has been shared publicly. So the Office of Dyslexia and Reading Disabilities will be created under the Connecticut State Department of Education, and the office will provide 2 kind of areas. In academics, its job is to approve universal screening assessments and provide guidance around that. developing and improving a voluntary family history questionnaire, and that will happen during 22-23. Developing compliance measures and audit procedures, focusing on recognition of structured literacy interventions for students with dyslexia. And these things will happen in educator preparation programs at the higher education level. So this office is really focused on higher ed and in service to educator certification requirements around structured literacy. Oops. Now, the second law that was passed has to do with it's called the Right to Read law. And this one was passed as part of the budget implementer bill. And its intention is to systemize the statewide reading response based on the science of reading by requiring the state to oversee all state and local efforts related to literacy, including setting reading curriculum requirements for districts, which many of you may have heard. There's going to be 5 curriculum programs that will be approved by the office that all districts will have to choose one from. Providing professional development, hiring external literacy coaches, and coordinating with teacher preparation programs. This new established Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success is where all of that work will take place. Oops. This Center for Literacy and Reading Success office has lots of responsibilities. So as part of the legislation, the state, it appears that the office is under the purview of the state instead of separate. But all districts will implement early literacy reading curricula that are evidence-based and approved by the center. In July of 2022, they will announce 5 reading curricula that have been approved that districts will need to choose from. They will implement a coordinated statewide reading plan for K-3. There's all kinds of things that they have to do. Develop birth to 3, collaborating with early childhood. They're supporting local boards of ed and district leadership and improving outcomes. They'll also be supporting teachers through coaching and leadership training. There'll be a technical assistance office that will help with MTSS and universal screening and diagnostics. They will conduct random reviews of how districts are implementing the approved programs and assessments, and they are going to publicly report reading curricula being implemented by each district. There'll be a website about the state's intensive reading instruction program, and they're also going to collaborate with institutes of higher education to ensure that the pre-service teachers' preparation is aligned with the science of reading. And a timeline of when all of those things are happening. So the next big announcement should be coming next summer, where we're going to know which of those 5 programs are being selected. And that's happening through the new center and this reading council that's been established. They will determine what those programs are. From there, schools will need to implement this new program by 2023. So they have a year to shift and make changes. And I found on the CSD website, they've already put this information up about the Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success. So it's in process. And in closing, we want to just share some closing thoughts. All children deserve and can learn to read well, and being literate is necessary to realizing our full potential as humans. And we know a lot about how children learn to read, and that can and should inform our work as educators, because what we teach and how we teach really, really matters. And if we can focus on prevention, we will ensure that more children learn to read, and will reduce the need for intervention. So we're hoping that you'll join the Connecticut Science of Reading group to build our knowledge together and help examine what we teach and how we teach it, and start to make some changes in your practice and explore systems of supporting students together. Some places for you to kind of go next. These are books that I highly recommend. I started out with them in my journey. Really great to get started, especially this book. Very accessible for educators. It's got the what, the why, and the how all laid out for you. All 5 pillars of reading instruction are in there. It's a really, really great resource. It's got lessons and ideas for activities and ideas for instruction built in as well. So excellent, excellent book. And this one as well, Explicit Instruction. I love Anita Archer. And if you go and Google her website, she's got videos of her in classrooms doing what she says in her book. So really great. And then the Reading Leagues, another great resource.
I think it's important that for everyone to realize that making this shift, or
Not American, it's a, yeah.
And it takes time. And my advice to teachers just diving into all this is pick one of those pillars and try to do it, and get as much information and be easy on yourself.
Absolutely.
One thing that you want to try to do differently that incorporates the science of reading, and then see. But I think my big thing is make sure that you know that whatever system you are using, it's working. And how do you know if it's working? Is those assessments. And are those assessments that you're using, are they backed by science? Or do they have a good record? I'm not going to give my struggling student a DRA and not be able to, or an F&P, when I know that those assessments are not backed by science. I want to really make sure to know what those skills are missing. So, and that's why we're here. Like, I'm happy to answer any questions in emails, or
Absolutely.
if you want to know, Kate, this is what I'm doing, does this, because everyone's curriculum is a little bit different and everyone's grade is a little bit different. So we're here to help you. The Connecticut Science page is such a huge tool to start this, but the laws are changing. You got to get on board, because you don't have a choice.
It's happening.
So if we can get ahead of it, we're just trying to make it easier. And that's really it.
Yeah. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we know your time is valuable, and we truly, truly appreciate your interest. And it's inspiring that to see, you come out on a Wednesday night. Hopefully you all have the holiday tomorrow and can rest and relax.